Welcome. You're watching Jim Cantelon Today TV. This is Bible teaching for the 21st century. Now, as you know, friends, for the last few months we've been going through the book of Matthew, and we have finished the first 4 chapters, and just in the last couple of weeks we have begun the most famous sermon of all time, the Sermon on the Mount, in Matthew chapter 5. And so after the break, we'll be picking it up on Blessed are the pure in heart. Boy, this is a real kicker, this one, because it causes us all more than a measure of introspection. Back with that right after this.
Jim Cantelon has published a Bible commentary from the genealogies of Jesus Christ to the chosen disciples. This is an exclusive and amazing work on the life of Christ. From Matthew's chapter 1 to 4, this commentary is the only way to hear Jim on what Jesus Christ did and how the Lord revealed him to us, and what that means to us every day in every way. For your copy, we ask that you send your best gift to Jim Cantelon Today. You can write or call or go to the website. Send to Jim Cantelon Today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7. Or call us at 519-415-8341. Or visit us at jimcantelontoday.com.
So just to remind you, Jesus is up on the Mount, and having lived there for 7 years in Israel, I know this place very well. I have spent hours and hours and hours there by myself, as I used to stop by on my way driving up to southern Lebanon to broadcast with Voice of Hope Radio. And then on my way back I would stop. Just kind of a natural halfway break between the Lebanese border and Jerusalem. And it's more like a hill than a mountain, but it qualifies as a mountain. And it's about, I would say, 400 to 500 feet above the Sea of Galilee. And you're looking down over the lake, which is called in Hebrew Kinneret, which means harp. It's very harp-shaped. It's about 12 kilometers long, about 6 kilometers wide. Absolutely beautiful, surrounded by mountains on the east and the west. On the east side, the Golan Heights and Syria. On the west, you've got what's called the Horns of Hittim, and it's mountains that lead to a plain and then into the Jezreel Valley. And then as you're looking straight down the lake, you're looking into the Jordan Valley all the way down to the Dead Sea. It's an absolutely strategic spot in Israel and absolutely beautiful. And there, up on this mountain, up above Capernaum, which was Jesus' adopted hometown, Jesus gathers his disciples, and you can be sure there were many other hangers-on, and he teaches them this remarkable teaching, which we now know as the Sermon on the Mount. And we have covered, blessed are the poor in spirit, those who mourn, the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, and the merciful. And now we're at blessed are the pure in heart. Now, before I get to that, I have something really exciting to tell you. We have just now produced the first of many of these Cantelon's casual commentaries. What we have here is Matthew chapter 1 through 4. What I've written here is extra material over and above what I'm able to cover in the television program. As you can assume, I'm only touching the surface here on the TV show. And this will be made available to you. You'll see a little ad for it in the show a little later with the coordinates. But this is yours if you want it, knowing that you'll be getting several more of these as the year unfolds. And when you write and ask for, or email, or whatever you do for this, please remember your best ministry gift. Friends, this is a mutual admiration society here. We're like public television. We're totally reliant on the Lord's provision through you, through the viewer. But I want to add as much value to you and your devotional life as I can. And so Cantelon's Casual Commentary, first edition, many more to come, God willing, with a book at the end of the circuit through the book of Matthew. And I'll also be producing another one soon on the Gospel of John. Okay. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Let's bring it up here on the screen. Verse 8. Now, this is one of those short sentences that you can kind of just gloss over without giving it much thought. But purity of heart is absolutely critical to anything and everything Jesus is saying here, not just in the Beatitudes, but in the entire Sermon on the Mount. And by the way, the next Cantelon's Casual Commentary that will be coming your way in a few months will incorporate all of the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5, 6, and 7. It'll be a very large volume. It's a massive task trying to expose, if you will, the truth of this marvelous sermon of Jesus. But blessed are the pure in heart is central to all of it. Now, in the Jewish context, purity of heart and the Greek katharos, I'm no Greek scholar, but I can study it, picks up the same nuance. Unmixed, unadulterated, unalloyed. In other words, no other agenda. You are just sort of there as you are, kind of like the lyrics of that hymn that has become so characteristic of the Billy Graham Crusades, just as I am without one plea. No phoniness, no veneer, no glass partition between us, just as I am. Unadulterated me. This is the pure of heart. The question that we always have to ask when it comes to our spiritual journey is, what are our motives? Are we out for ourselves, or are we out for something bigger than ourselves? Now, certainly we ourselves are engaged in the process, because the Lord's call, come to me, all ye who are weary and are heavy laden, applies to us as individuals. Okay, so I'm not saying that we as individuals are lost in the amorphous, mass of believers out there. But we've got to ask, what's our motive? And the motive inextricably is tied to worldview. How do you see the world? Not just this world, but how do you see the unfolding of time? Do you see space and time, as we call it now, the short 70 years plus that we have here on earth, as everything? Or is it merely the beginning of a spiritual shelf life, if you will, that will be everlasting? Is there more life awaiting us on the other side than there is currently? Now, the biblical worldview says that is the case. It's hard to get our minds around this. But when you think in those terms, it has a drastic effect on your values here on earth. If in fact you truly believe that the only thing you will take with you when you die and go to be with the Lord is what you've given away, then your values are going to be totally countercultural in terms of our current secular world. That doesn't mean you'll be weird, but it means that what you value will not necessarily be what your friends and relatives and neighbors value if they do not have this worldview that is biblically based. And this is the great divide between the Christian and the secular world. It's not just a case of certain secular standards being assimilated by both or whatever. It's a case of actually marching to the beat of a different drum. And that's the issue here. With purity of heart, there is no spiritual astigmatism. You see clearly. And what Jesus is saying here is, you not only see clearly now, you will see clearly then. And the day will come, he is saying, when we will see God with our pure hearts. Now, when you study purity of heart in the Old Testament scriptures, and I can give you a few references here, I won't read them, but Psalm 24, verses 3 and 4. Psalm 24, verses 3 and 4, write that down. a terrific little insight into purity of heart. Or Psalm 51, verses 6 and 10. Psalm 51, 6 and 10, or Psalm 73, 1. Even Psalm 86, 11, where the psalmist says, unite my heart to fear thy name. The call to unite one's heart means rid it of clashing agendas, rid it of any agenda other than that of the pursuit of the heavenly worldview. In that context, I will fear thy name because you, O Lord, are the one who holds the keys to heaven and hell, life and death. And so I will naturally and wisely fear you, even while I love you, because you're the one that says yea or nay to my everlasting self. But in the context of those Psalms in the Hebrew language, there are at least three nuances that jump out at me as I study them. One is, a pure heart is a heart that is free from inner division. You know, we talk about divided heart. We feel torn, we're conflicted, to use a contemporary term. And of course that, life is full of conflict. It's not as though to have a conflicted heart one is suddenly out of sync with heaven. That's not the case. But in terms of one's values, in terms of how one orders one's life, one is free from inner division. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, Joshua said. Well, that is a very clear, undivided inner value, a statement of conviction that will stand the test of time. Free from inner division. A second nuance is free from falsehood. You can't have a pure heart if you have not just mixed motives, but you're hedging your bets. You're saying one thing and meaning another, or you're just expressing a partial truth, that can be, and usually is, misleading to the person you're trying to convince. When that is the case, your heart is anything but pure. You are impinging on falsehood territory, if not falsehood altogether. Which leads to the third nuance in the Hebrew language, and that is without guile. You're not manipulating. You're not controlling. You're not seeking your advantage. Your heart is free of guile. You're not trying to con anyone or mislead them. So, free from inner division, free from falsehood, free from guile. These are some of the nuances in the Hebrew language with regard to purity of heart. And in the New Testament, everything of value starts inwardly in the heart. Now you can say, come on, heart. It's a physical organ, that pumps blood to the body, and then when you die, it stops pumping. We're not talking about the physical heart here, but what you need to understand is that in the Jewish worldview, the chest, if you will, this part of your body, the visceral part of you, where you feel things, is also where you think. Even though, the Old Testament is very strong on the brain and all of that, but the emotional decision-making processes come from, if you will, intuitive and or instinctive emotional motivation from here. And so that's what's meant when it refers to the heart. And from Jesus' point of view, as we'll see later as we study Matthew, to be pure in heart means to keep the first and great commandment. And what is that? You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. And there's a whole study that can be done there. And as I said with Cantelon's casual commentary, when we finish the cycle with this, I'll be writing a book, same title, which will include this material plus a lot of added material. And one of those added addenda will be an essay on heart, soul, mind, and strength. When you study heart, soul, mind, and strength, again in the Hebrew context, you essentially are looking at intellect, emotion, and will. How you think, how you feel, and what you do. To be pure in heart means to be pure not only with your heart, but also with your soul, with your mind, and with your strength. Strength being your decision making. Okay? So, in Jewish thought, heart includes both emotions and the mind, I made that point, and the pure-hearted man of Psalm 24, verse 4, has had no desire for falsehood and has not sworn to a lie. In other words, he's someone who not only can be trusted, but he's someone whose word is his bond. You know, if purity of heart were the, prominent characteristic of humankind out there, there'd be no need for contracts other than a handshake. Just eye to eye, I agree to do this, you can count on me, I'll do it. For a lot of us, that's enough. A lot of us have relationships with people with whom we trust, and they have purity of heart, you have purity of heart, and you can literally sign, if you will, off on millions with nothing more than a handshake and a nod. But unfortunately, human nature being what it is, we tend to be anything but pure in our motives and have mixed motives often, and sometimes are very much with guile, not without guile. Very much with falsehood, not without falsehood, because it's to our advantage. You know, I was, and I read about this in Cantelon's Casual Commentary. I saw my first cathedral when I was a high school student. I was at that time in high school in Northern Ontario, and we came down to Toronto on a band competition, had some free time, and I walked around downtown Toronto. I was in awe. I'd come from a little town in Northern Ontario. I couldn't believe the size of the buildings. And, as my father would say, I was getting the roof of my mouth sunburned because I was just gaping at everything. But I came across a cathedral I'd never seen before. I look at the windows, they look all kind of gray and dull, big stained glass windows, and I'm thinking, well, gee whiz, stained glass windows, those things have been oversold. But I walked inside. Those dull gray, purpley, sort of red, pink windows from the inside were a kaleidoscope of brilliance, various Bible imageries and scriptures and so on. It just blew me away. Well, you know what, friends? Purity of heart is kind of like that. If your heart is impure, all you see is sort of the grays and the dull, taupey and sort of burnt purpley colors. A pure heart sees the window from the inside with the light shining in, and it's a totally different experience. That's what it means to see God. And if you aren't a believer yet, and this kind of blows you away, you understand something. You say to the Lord, create in me a clean heart, O Lord. Watch out for what happens.
Very few African mothers ever see a doctor or midwife, yet each mother knows how fragile her child's life is. You see, 26,000 children under the age of 5 will die today because they don't have access to medical care. Your gift of $260, just $22 every month, helps stock a mobile clinic and train healthcare workers to care for young mothers and their children during pregnancy and preschool years. Join WOW Mother Care now. Protect the life of a mother and her child.
The work of the Word of God is stunningly remarkable. We must understand that God has placed His life codes of salvation and healing in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Jim Cantelon is focused on the messages that God has communicated through the Bible to you and me. Today, it's more important for us now that we learn what God is saying to us. God has placed us here now to be examples and to share the good news of His work with the world today. If you've heard the Divine Mind speak to you through this program, then God has worked in amazing ways to reveal His Word. Remember that this program has cost, and we have been faithful to God to bring this program to you. If you want to give an offering in any amount, we would appreciate it. Send to Jim Cantelon today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R3Y7. Or call us at 519-415-8341. Or simply visit jimcantelontoday.com.
All right. I want to take a little time here on the second part of the Beatitude. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Okay, right there. This is a huge issue for many. It seems almost presumptuous, for Jesus to suggest that any of us could ever claim to see God. Now, I made the point a few moments ago that, as I see it, the seeing God is something that happens, if you will, on the other side. And I think that's really where the full revelation, if you will, of God's presence will be made known. However, Jesus is also talking space and time here. He's talking about the now. And is he suggesting for a moment it's possible to see God, especially when the scripture says no one has seen God at any time? What's he talking about here? Well, I'm not saying that we're necessarily going to have a vision of God, although some people do. But we're going to see God not only in the world of nature, but we're going to see God in the outworking of our lives. And I could literally refer you to millions and millions of testimonials throughout the world, if I had access to them all right now, of people who have seen God at work in their lives. Now, there's the atheistic point of view, of course, or even the mildly secular perspective. This is, you people who say you see God, you're just basically, you're religious. And this whole concept of God is a comfort to you, and good for you that you're comforted by that. But it's a kind of a condescending dismissal of the whole idea. Well, that's one way of approaching it. That certainly gives you the excuse to turn away from the implications and or the responsibility of that possibility. Because for sure, anytime you see God, you're going to be accountable to what you've seen. There's something about God that brings with it accountability. You can't look at God and walk away unchanged. You can't do it. You see God in whatever context, and it's life-shaking. And in many ways, it's life-forming. And a lot of you could, if you had access to a camera like I do right now, you could testify to that fact. I was talking about atheism recently with a good friend, and I said, I would have a hard time being an atheist. It's such a leap of faith. For one thing, I would have to know what God would look like if he did exist. Secondly, I'd have to know that there's no evidence for him anywhere in the trackless universe, and the astrophysicists now tell us there's 10 trillion, galaxies, 10 trillion. And I'd also have to know that all the people who put their trust in God throughout the centuries were dead wrong. I'd have to know all of that. And of course, no one is smart enough or knowledgeable enough or exposed enough to know all of that. In either case, you're taking a leap of faith. The Bible says, the fool has said in his heart there is no God. A pretty harsh statement. I think the Bible calls it like it is. You look at the world of nature, that in itself is enough to convince you. You see design on every level. And the more science is bringing our way, both in terms of the micro and the macro, the universe out there, macro, the micro, the world of the smallest order of life, it's way below a cellular life, you're just astonished at the order that is there. And you look at it and say, there's got to be a designer. I mean, how can any of this just be random? How can any of this just have happened? Well, historians and theologians, they look at the life of Abraham, who was a Mesopotamian. He lived down there at the convergence of the Tigris and Euphrates River in modern-day Iraq, a place that was called Ur of the Chaldees at that time. And he reasoned, these theologians say, he reasoned back to God. He looked at the world around him and said, there's something behind this. And he reasoned his way to a prime mover, to a designer, to someone who has put it all in motion. Seeing God is a complicated matter in most cases. But when Jesus says the pure in heart will see him, what he's saying here is that when you have purity of heart, you have clarity of vision. No astigmatism, as I said in the last segment. You can see stuff, if you will, that the rest of the world doesn't see. And you might point it out to someone and say, what are you talking about? You're mad. I don't see that. But you see it. Because the purity of your heart is like another dimension of clarity of vision. And God speaks to your heart. He enlightens your mind. He draws you to himself. And even though physically you cannot define him or describe him, you've seen him all right. And what you see on the other side one day will confirm, only expand and expose the bigger picture of what you've seen in the small picture here in space and time.
Remote and rural, these children and their families have no access to medical care. There is no clinic nearby. And when a mother is desperate to save her dying child, she will walk for many hours. Sometimes the child doesn't survive. So we go to them. These tables and chairs under the trees look like a gathering, not a medical clinic. But the doctors and nurses are transforming the lives of the children and their families. They provide primary medical care, classes on sanitation, medicines, and a better understanding of HIV and AIDS. Most of all, they bring hope as they diagnose, treat, and educate families. This clinic is a gift from donors that will transform their lives. You can become part of that transformation. Your gift of $25 will provide health care for an entire family. $100 provides care for 6 families. Be a part of real change. Go to wowmission.ca/saveachild.
Well, friends, a half hour goes by really quickly, huh? I just want to remind you, I'm really excited about this. This is the first of many booklets that will be available to you that track our on-air Bible teaching. This is Matthew 1 through 4. It's called Cantelon's Casual Commentary, and it's available to you. The coordinates are there from time to time on the show. You can phone, you can write, you can email, and remember your best ministry gift when you ask for it. Okay, friends, this is our little gift to you, and you give a gift to us. Works great. See you next time.
Contact us. Jim Cantelon Today, P.O. Box 989, Burlington, Ontario, L7R 3Y7. If you're sending a check, make it payable to Jim Cantelon Today. Or visit us online at jimcantelontoday.com and click Support.